Okay, so hey everyone, I'm Jordan Freed, and this session is about how to build an enterprise-grade public network and introduce it into the market. And I think also the important question is, why do we need an enterprise-grade blockchain in the market anyway, when we have things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and other things? And what do we actually mean when we say, enterprise-grade and sort of all of that?
Hey,
So,
Jordan,
yeah.
it's so sorry to interrupt you and your flow, but I just wanted to take a very brief instant and thank David for his talk on behalf of whoever also wanted to share it. So thank you, David, very much for sharing all your wisdom. It was really interesting and looking forward to connect again. Thank you, Jordan, also for being here and looking forward to your talk. Thank you, guys.
Oh, great. Thanks. I appreciate that. So, great. So Hedera Hashgraph I know we just have a few participants here, so we can keep this casual, and feel free to interrupt if you have questions as we go. But has anyone heard of Hedera, or is this the first time for some of you here? Maybe you could raise your hand virtually or just chime in. Let's see. I can see.
Yep, I've heard of it.
Great. Okay, cool. So at Hedera, we like to think of ourselves as a trust layer of the internet, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on what that is. I figured, because this isn't a blockchain specific global unconference, it may make sense to actually talk about what we mean when we talk about blockchains and decentralization. I like to think about it as trust. It's really what we focus on. And when we talk about trust in the course of our day-to-day lives today, we rely on lots of different brokers and auditors and intermediaries to create trusted situations for us to go about business. And those could be broker dealers. That's when you use escrow to buy a home. That could be for your medical records. There's brokers for that information, or for customs and commodities trading, and even pawn shops. So we've got intermediaries. When you call an Uber, Uber is the intermediary that's matching you with the driver. And when we talk about the future of decentralization, and when we talk about the technology that will help deliver that, what we're really talking about is disintermediating a lot of this landscape. Do we actually need a company called Uber and a company called Airbnb to match a passenger with a driver? Or if a passenger could just verify independently the credentials of a driver, would it be just as safe and just as efficient for that passenger to, let's say, get in the vehicle? So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of businesses being built that are decentralizing the space in the world of DeFi. DeFi stands for decentralized finance. People are creating a lending platform so people can take out loans without counterparty risks, and without having a bank in between to pre-qualify you, or things of that nature. So it's a really exciting time in the world of disintermediation. To kind of walk through how we got to where we are today, we obviously went from a world where 1960s, 1970s, everything was very paper documentation based. Insurance is one industry that still hasn't really caught up and is still largely paper document based. We had mainframes and computers really come into the workplace, and thanks to companies like IBM that helped made that a thing, and things got a little faster. And then with the advent of the internet, we were able to build faster, more accessible tools and web applications to provide services to end users from service providers, which is great. And really the shift that we're seeing now is we're entering this trust era, where those service providers are also being disrupted, and we're gaining this element of trust that we didn't previously have in the previous waves. And in this world of this next generation technology, since 2009, we've had this thing called Bitcoin come about. And then we had people take the Bitcoin white paper, which had fantastic ideas about how to create this amazing, globally distributed, let's call it payment layer to the internet. And we had something called Ethereum come about, which proposed improvements to what Bitcoin had introduced to the world, but introduced things like smart contract execution and digital asset creation, and that led to a big boom in 2017. And now we have a series of companies like Hedera Hashgraph that are again trying to improve on that second wave of distributed infrastructure to help application developers and help companies build the next generation of the web, this trust layer on top of the web as we have it today. To just jump in and kind of get to our technology, the requirements of adoption, and what we really need to have happen for there to be enterprises come and use, let's say, blockchains today, or to really execute on this vision, we really identified 4 key requirements. And those requirements were really performance is being the first, where when you talk about the need to do things very quickly on the internet, obviously the internet went from being something very slow, just from connection speeds and the ability to access information and download information, to something that was made much faster in the world today. We need to get blockchains to speed up as well. And there's many proposals on how to do that and many really great innovations in the space. But for enterprises to really come and adopt and move traditional workloads from their organizations today to technology like this, we've got to be able to, do thousands of transactions per second. We also need to be able to have enterprise grade security. We need to be able to prove that when transactions settle, they're actually settled. You're not really going to have banks use blockchains for cross-border payments until they can prove that these payments are settled. And all the POCs that you see happening today for those cross-border payments and those use cases, a lot of that is with infrastructure that the banks control, because they've got to be able to minimize their risks. So those are, permissioned networks that are being deployed. And then the final 2 are kind of interesting, and this gets somewhat political, but the final 2 have to deal with stability and governance. When we talk about requirements for a mainstream adoption of a public DLT, it's important to understand who's making the decisions for the platform that we're building on top of. When you deploy a website or a web application, if you're building, let's say, a new iPhone application and you're going to use Amazon Web Services as your backend infrastructure, we know who makes the decisions at Amazon, right? It's Jeff Bezos and a trusted team of people that have built a great infrastructure toolkit, and we're using their tools to deliver our application to the market. But when you use these blockchains, who's really making the decisions for how these blockchains function? What if tomorrow the blockchain functions differently than it did today? What if the price to execute my application, to issue a token or to play this game, what if my costs as a game developer drastically increase overnight because of things that were outside of my control? Governance is really important. And when we say governance, what I'm really referring to is who has the legal controls and technical controls required to have a stable platform in the marketplace. And frankly, we don't have great answers for this today, but there are groups like ourselves that are trying to bring proposed solutions to the marketplace. And then stability really just comes down to, can these platforms be forked? For those that follow Bitcoin, that there's many different flavors of it today. Pick the one you like. There's even a Bitcoin pizza. There's a Bitcoin diamond. There's a Bitcoin gold. There's a Bitcoin cash. There's many different versions of it, right? And because these are open source technologies, they can be forked. And when we talk about enterprises coming to use public DLTs, while forking may be great for open source communities and may create evolutionary versions of platforms, it creates a very big problem in a deployment environment for an enterprise. If an enterprise has deployed an application on a public network, it is not a good idea to fork that deployment version of that platform and create, spin-off versions of it that would create uncertainty and instability. And enterprises don't really need that, and that's hard to adopt. So as Hedera, we've built a network that's based on, it's quite literally not a blockchain. There's a technology that was invented by a guy named Dr. Lehman Baird, who happens to be our chief scientist, who had created a new proposed solution for how you come to consensus at scale. Quite literally, a blockchain is a chain of blocks. In many cases, it uses proof of work to solve these complex puzzles and everyone's fighting for this right to add a new block to the chain and earn some economic reward. In Hashgraph, we have a graph, as you can see here, that's bound together by cryptographic hashes of how different computers in a network are talking to each other. And because of the elegant architecture, we're actually able to achieve performance and security results that earlier generations of public DLTs or blockchains were not able to. And we can achieve really cool performance results as a result. So if you see, Bitcoin today is quite slow. It's a fantastic. I personally I hold quite a bit of Bitcoin as a full disclosure, and I'm a big Bitcoin proponent. And I'm also a big fan of what Ethereum has introduced. I think it really popularized the concept of tokenization and in smart contracts and things of that nature. At Hedera, we actually use the Solidity smart contract system that the Ethereum virtual machine introduced as our smart contract execution framework. But what we're doing is we've improved on the performance quite a bit. We've also lowered the cost quite a bit because of the elegant nature of how we can execute transactions with complete finality based on the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. And then, of course, there's guaranteed finality. We can do that very quickly, and that's very exciting. And by the way, none of this is theoretical. This is all deployed. This is all in the market. Hedera is public, and if there's time, I can share some screenshots about what's happening live on the network and the progress that we've made thus far. This is the platform that we determined to be an enterprise grade platform. It looks very simple. You need a cryptocurrency, and that's really required to use the services of the network. If you're going to execute a smart contract, you have to pay for it. And instead of taking fiat, we charge this cryptocurrency. The cryptocurrency really has two core purposes. It's how you consume the services of the network, and it's also how you incentivize the nodes on the network to help offer those services. So you have different nodes on the network that offer APIs to the world, to an ecosystem of individuals, enterprises, governments, and devices that can build applications on top of this services layer. And the way you pay these nodes and that they're incentivized to continue to operate is you pay fees, which are determined, and I'll explain how those are determined, but you pay fees to consume these services. So we have things like a file system, we have things like smart contract execution, like I mentioned, but we have this really unique feature, and what our core differentiator is a consensus service. So if you think about what consensus is really just putting a whole bunch of arbitrary bytes of data into fair order. So whether that's clicks in a video game, or whether that's, let's say, post-settlement data from a stock market, or regardless of what it is, you send this arbitrary information to this consensus service. It puts it in fair order, and it gives you a provable timestamp and a state proof that says, yes, this is what happened, and this happened at that time. And there's lots of really cool applications that can be built on top of that, including the biggest use case that we see enterprises taking an interest in, which is private DLTs. That's quite literally launching a private network. So that's right, like a Hyperledger Fabric, if you're familiar with that, or R3 Corda, and launching that network, leveraging the consensus of a public network, which gives you sort of all the benefits of a private network, the privacy and the control of your infrastructure, while being able to run it, leveraging the elevated trust of a consensus engine that's being powered by the nodes of a public network, which is the first time something like this has existed in the public blockchain market. I won't go into too much detail on these. There's a lot of this is public, but there's just some reference users that use and are different currencies. The currency service today, there's a company called Red Swan that is doing asset tokenization. They're tokenizing real estate and creating security tokens around that, which should be a familiar use case for those that follow blockchain. Earth ID is really cool. They're in the self-sovereign identity space, and what they're doing is creating identity and access management solutions and using our file service to store some of those credentials. So for example, when you try to log in to a website, you can check, is this person still an employee of our company? Do they still have a credential? Is it good? And that's an important service. And then our consensus service. We actually have deployed live on our mainnet a very high throughput company that is, believe it or not, an ad platform that is using the Hedera network to help advertisers essentially have more confidence in how their ad dollars are being spent. For those that follow ad tech, you'll know that there are many cases of let's say fraud, where Uber sued their ad agency because of let's say click fraud, where they thought they were just Russian botnets stuffing clicks and they weren't real clicks. So how do we know that when someone clicks on an ad as an advertiser that you're getting the bang for your buck and that's what someone's really paying for? We have a big ecosystem of apps. So there's lots of cool companies building on this network, and we've got, some really great throughput. We are, this number is actually quite outdated because I forgot to update this presentation earlier. We actually do over 1 million transactions per day, which depending on the day, that may make us one of the most utilized public networks in the market. In awareness of that is somewhat further behind, as a lot of this is not, let's say, out there in the market, but we're again trying to push it out and build awareness. Some more information on ad stacks. We have another cool company called Acore, which has built a coronavirus tracking tool, which is great, and I'll try to provide that URL if anyone is interested. And then the bit that I am most excited about, and I certainly hope some of you are as well, is how do we govern this thing? Like, how is this different? Why is this significant? Why should I care about this? And I think this is like the real gotcha. And some people love this and some people hate this. But when you talk about governance, you really need to think about how are we, again, going to make decisions for this platform, and who are going to be those decision makers. So when we were launching it, we recognized that we didn't want to ask strangers to trust us. It's too hard to do that. Very few people know who I am, Jordan Freed, and very few people even know who Dr. Lehman Baird is, or Mance Harmon, who are some of the founders of the network. So what we decided to do was invite some of the largest companies in the world, companies that were from, let's say, leaders in their respective industries, that were diverse across geographic areas, so that this wasn't just an American network or a British network or an Australian network, but this would be a global network, a network that had companies from every major continent, a network that would have members from every major sector of industry, and that we would require these members to run nodes on the network, so actually to be offering these services and participating, and that these members wouldn't have adverse incentives, that they couldn't be manipulated, they couldn't be compensated in a way that could lead them to do something harmful, but they would get compensated in the same way that anyone else on the network would get compensated in. So there's incentive alignment. The only way that members can earn money is through node incentives. And in the future, we hope that everyone runs nodes on the Hedera network, and that should align incentives. These members would also be term limited. So no one can stay a benevolent dictator forever. There's 2 consecutive 3-year terms. And there would be a group of 39 where these 39 members would collaborate and make decisions together. But again, it's a small enough group where you still have an incentive to come participate. So no one company would have effectively a 2.6% influence over the network. And then again, why do we need this? Why did we why did we make such a big emphasis on network governance and network decision making in this way? It's because we needed people to decide, what is the network going to look like? Literally, what are we going to build? When are we going to build this product roadmap? What gets built when? What are we going to charge for use of this network? And how do we manage the tokens? This network has a big treasury. Does it go all into my pocket? Does it go into the companies that govern the network's pocket? How is that spent? And we needed a framework for that. Again, when we talk about governance, what we're really trying to solve for is who is enforcing the technical controls and who has the legal controls required to keep the platform stable such that it can gain mass enterprise adoption in the market. So I'm happy to share that today this council exists. It's been operational for over a year now, which is really exciting. We have some of the biggest companies in the world that have signed up to participate. We've been able to work with the folks at IBM and Boeing and Google, as well as Tata Communications and Deutsche Telekom. FIS recently acquired WorldPay, making them the largest merchant acquirer in the world. DLA Piper is one of the largest global law firms in the world. Magazine Luiza is sort of the Alibaba and Amazon of Brazil. They're a fantastic company and one of the fastest growing technology companies from that region. Nomura is a large trusted financial services organization in Japan. And these are the companies that are publicly announced. We filled more seats, and those companies will be announced shortly. Up until we have 39, and I work for these 39. They can fire me, they can hire me. They quite literally, they operate our network. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's what we've built at Hedera. I went through that pretty quickly, and I do have extra slides where we could talk more in depth. But that's how we've solved for performance, security, stability, and governance. We have the biggest companies in the world that have come and launched this network and the associated services with it. That's how we've achieved the security and the performance using the Hashgraph algorithm. We've got a great team of people. Dr. Lehman Baird actually just had an interview published today with Charlie Shrem. For those that know, who's been a big Bitcoiner from back in the early days, and has is a very published computer scientist. So I encourage you to read the white paper and get more involved and learn more about what we're doing. We think it's a very exciting time. And for those that are developers or business builders, really what I love doing is supporting a large ecosystem of prospective users to come and build on this platform and engage directly with us. So I will stop there. I know I had more time, but I will stop there and maybe take some questions if there are any, or kind of just turn the time back to you guys and see how you'd like to use it. And I apologize for the loud child in the background if anyone can hear that. That is my 3-year-old. Cool. If there are no questions, I can hang out for a little bit and answer questions over chat if that's more convenient. If someone wants to ask a question privately, I don't know who's the host here. It kind of just seems like a pretty cool, just come grab the mic if you want the mic.
I'll hit you with the question, Jordan.
Thanks.
What do you see as the major sort of barriers for you guys as far as getting more developer adoption and awareness and stuff like that? Like, are you measuring internal metrics and stuff like that for those things?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are. So it's with public ledgers, it's fairly transparent how they're being used. So if you look at public tools on a day-to-day basis, I'll quickly pull one up and maybe just try to share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. But if you look at, I think one of the best North Star metrics of a public network is its utilization in general. So what is the transactional activity that's happening? Is it all just wash trading from exchanges? So in cryptocurrency, obviously we have a lot of speculation, or is it actual users building applications and deploying? So I'll share this real quick. This is a tool called Dragonglass. It's a publicly available tool. There's another one called Kabuto, which you can go check out. And another one, I think they're called #hash.info. These are all open source tools that are looking at the network in real time. And you can see that Hedera, this is ticking up in real time. Hedera in less than 8 months has actually been able to get over 105 million transactions on the mainnet. You can see what the nodes are doing and what geographic area. If we look at just the last 24 hours, I think this is a really good metric. So we have 1.1 million transactions that have just occurred in the last 24-hour period. And I just think for comps, I know that's not impressive in terms of utilization per se, because any regular application using something like MQ RabbitMQ or IBM MQ or Kafka probably blows those numbers away in an hour. But for a public network, there's not that much utilization out there in the market today. For comps, the Ethereum network may do 600 or 700,000 transactions in a day, and we think it's meaningful that we've surpassed that from real applications that are deployed like AdStacks, which is that ad platform I mentioned. So I would definitely say that how we're thinking about it is we'd love to see this number continue to grow over time, and it has. If I pull up like 1 month, may take a second for this to load. We can see some pretty significant growth in the network. New companies are onboarding themselves on their own. Again, it's a public network all the time. There's a lot of companies building on our network that we don't even know about. We really can only talk about who we know about. We're kind of the foundation behind the network that represents our council members. But yeah, it's not a perfect answer, but that's kind of how we think about it and how we try to measure it is what's the transactional throughput.
Do you guys have any major projects pursuing, let's say securities, token issuances and things of that nature within your kind of ecosystem or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have some council members. So some of those big companies that I mentioned are actually very interested in that particular use case and are actively looking at it. Those are, I can't mention which one exactly, but they'll probably start talking about it publicly this year. I would hope over the summer. But yeah, we actually have, multi-billion-dollar multinational companies that are putting together tokenization platforms and then are looking to do their own tokenizations on Hedera, which is really cool. It's not a core differentiator for us that like we don't advertise. Like a lot of people do smart contracts, right? You can do smart contracts on Ethereum. You can do smart contracts on EOS. So that's kind of a Me Too feature. Again, what we're really excited about, and I think what we offer that's very different in the market is that consensus engine. And that allows you for workloads that it makes sense to do this is like, frankly, replace Kafka in some cases based on how you're using it. Like just, use a public network consensus instead, or launch a private network instead of running your own leader-based consensus algorithm. So, but yes, we do have securitization use cases.
So as of right now, there's no like significant other sub-token liquidity on tokens that have been issued through Hedera technology.
So there's not a large secondary market. Like if you're referring to the 2017 ICO boom where all those ERC20 contracts got issued on Ethereum, there isn't a big ecosystem of people who are raising capital through collecting HBAR in that way. Again, I really give a lot of credit to Ethereum for kind of like birthing this world of decentralized finance and capital raising in these unique ways, like through these token issuances. By the way, Hedera was capitalized through a token raise, not an Ethereum token raise. We were capitalized through a legal mechanism called the SAFT, a simple agreement for future tokens, where we raised money through accredited investors and did a Reg D filing with the SEC. And that's how we were able to capitalize and launch the network. We do have companies like Tune FM has launched, I think it's called Tune token. And that's on our network. So there are companies that have issued tokens, but it's not something that we don't want people to know us by that. And we're not trying to, go after that as, let's say, this is the exemplar case study of how we want the network to be used.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the questions. Is everyone else on this call anyone else in the blockchain space? And Joe, was that you asking the questions? Are you in the world of blockchain DLT?
Yeah, I was one of the sort of founding team of Ethereum, and I started MetaMask as well, and done a bunch of things.
Awesome. Very cool. I love MetaMask. I've used it to play many MetaMask games.
Stuart asked a question in the text chat. He said, "Any tokenization of impact investing?"
Impact investing. So that's a really cool question. So as a foundation, we focus on like grants. So if we see really cool, so for example, the group that's working on the coronavirus use cases applied for grants, and we support, I think similar to the Ethereum Foundation. I've seen like Ethereum Foundation grants. as well. So we try to support projects in that way. We're very limited in what we do. I know that Ethereum has organizations like Consensus that exist that are more aggressive in what they do in terms of go to market, like building stuff like MetaMask. We, from a regulatory perspective, and being our network is legally domiciled here in the United States, we're kind of limited in what we can do in terms of impact investing. We actually can't own, or at least it's unclear whether a public blockchain network like Hedera can own a equity in even a social enterprise. So that's just been a whole activity space that we've just avoided entirely, and instead just decided to opt for grants where we don't get a return, but we can maybe sponsor some developers who are working on solving some really cool problems. Was there another question in the chat? I missed it. Thanks for the question, Stuart, by the way. Joel, were you talking earlier on, did you give a presentation as well?
I am. It's about a slightly different topic. I'm going to do it later, about the nature of mastery and kind of what that means. I'm actually teaching some master courses, and I have some other people who teach, kind of university and educate, regulators and things about cryptocurrency more generally, who put together these 6-hour-long modules about, kind of what it means to master a particular subject area. So we have a kind of technology track where we have a trading track from some of the top crypto traders out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you still active in the Ethereum Foundation or in that community?
Whenever I find a new project that excites me, I join the Discords and, kind of participate. At the moment, I'm looking at synthetic labor-based tokens. So there's this project, Me Tokens, that I'm pretty interested in. But yeah, it's a little more like when I'm excited about something.
Very cool. Very cool. That's great. Yeah, I really like what you guys. I didn't realize MetaMask was one of your projects. We liked that one quite a bit, and we recognized that was a gap. We actually gave a grant to a team that put together something called Composer, which is essentially the Hedera equivalent for that, which turned out to be pretty useful for the ecosystem for people who needed similar functionality. But I think there's a lot of networks out there that still need their MetaMask component to gain more utility in how their code can be used.
I do a lot of asset tokenization and advisory work for investment banks, stuff like that. So, if the securitization stuff moves forward within your area and you need infrastructure around that stuff, I definitely either, there might even be some off-the-shelf stuff that could be repurposed for Hedera, but I'm definitely a person to reach out to because I don't know, I have a lot of experience building enterprise tools and now in the kind of financial services / blockchain industry.
Yeah, let's connect offline on that. There's some really cool, I think you'd really like these particular use cases, and I'd need the enterprise to give us permission to share more about it. But I mean, just in terms of smart contract execution, it's literally copy and paste. So of course you need HBAR to be able to execute, but it's copy and paste the Solidity scripts. And we actually have many developers that have just decided to bring that over. Again, it's not like we were able to speed up the Ethereum virtual machine all that much. You're still kind of bound by the restraints in the EVM, but that's kind of why we push people to launch your own private network and issue tokens in a private network using the consensus service as a preferred architecture. But yeah, if you want to just copy and paste Solidity scripts as it exists today, you can do that as well.
I sent you a LinkedIn request, so.
Awesome. Where are you based, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm based in the Bay Area, but I'm
nice.
Do a lot of business in Latin America and Russia and Dubai and London and stuff. So.
Cool. Yeah, I was normally in New York, but coronavirus had us fleeing, so we're down in Florida for the time being, but hopefully we can make a return when it's safe. Wasn't the best place to be with a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm in the woods outside San Francisco at the moment. It's pretty decent.
That's a good place to be. You can social distance there.
I think I'm going to drop off here. I assume there's some other speaker that's supposed to start sometime soon. That
Cool.
hasn't
Well, hey, thank you
voiced
all
themselves
for
yet.
attending. I'll kind of be here on mute if
Yeah.
anyone has any other questions, but nice to meet you, Joel.
Thanks, Jordan.